Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vogt, good to see you. Congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for being willing to do this job again. You did a great job the first time around. I look forward to seeing you back in this office. Let me just ask you, one of the important functions of OMB is the role that it plays in managing procurement through the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. Would you agree with me that it is a problem? And by the way, I think 1 out of every 10 taxpayer dollars goes to federal contractors. So that's a lot of money. That's a big part of our budget. Would you agree with me that it's a problem when we are sending federal contracting dollars to entities, firms, especially consulting firms, that are simultaneously taking money from and doing business with our most lethal opponents, like China, for example? I mean, doesn't that strike you as a little strange?
That is concerning, yes, Senator.
Here's an example, prime example of this kind of behavior. McKinsey, the consulting firm. So McKinsey got, in the last year for which we had full numbers available, over $851 million worth of consulting work. They had 90 prime contracts with DOD. They got $98 million in contracts from the Army, $132 million from the Air Force, $37 million from the Navy. I think they advised on the F-35 fighter jet program and the Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center. At the same time, they had 1,000 employees in China. They were doing business directly with the Chinese government, and they advised Chinese state-owned enterprises that have now been blacklisted by our own military. Now, my view is that if they want to do business with China, I don't recommend it, but I suppose it's fine so long as it's not illegal. But I don't think they should simultaneously be getting hundreds of millions, approaching $1 billion in contracts, federal contracts, military contracts from our own government. Here's my question for you. You're going to have a lot of influence in this process through the procurement rules and process. Will you be an advocate for protecting American taxpayer dollars in this contracting process where hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year? Will you be an advocate for protecting that and making sure it's not going to entities who are effectively double dealing and advising our enemies at the same time?
Absolutely. I'm very excited, if confirmed, getting back to being able to work with OFPP, getting a handle on the guidance that we're giving government-wide as part of the FAR Council, and to really look at what are the regulations that are in place and how can we get them better.
Great. That's great. That's fantastic. Give me a sense, just while still on the procurement topic, how you might ensure that procurement policies prioritize American-made goods and services, particularly in industries that are vital to our national security. And I just think about our experience in COVID, and you were there for the beginning, the onset of the pandemic, and when we learned that, my gosh, we couldn't, the most basic medical supplies we're importing from overseas. Our medical supply chains are so compromised in so many ways. So give me a sense, have you given some thought to how the procurement process might be used to safeguard those critical supply chains and prioritize American manufacturers?
Yeah, I think clear leadership from the director to make sure that a viewpoint for the president is implemented at the level of policy that the OFPP is reviewing. A lot of times in the management functions at OMB, they're kind of on autopilot with regard to the clear direction of the president, and using the president's management tools and his agenda to be able to drive that policy across the federal government is something that we fully intend to do, and to do it robustly.
Very good. Let me shift gears just a little bit, but still thinking about federal regulations. Through OIRA, you have a lot of influence, thankfully, on the regulatory landscape and environment. I asked your predecessor in this role, the Biden administration nominee, if she would commit to the Hyde Amendment and the principle that we should not be using federal taxpayer dollars to promote abortions, which has been a bipartisan commitment, as you well know, for decades. She wouldn't commit to that. And indeed, as you know, the Biden administration pretty promptly walked back their commitment to it and has been essentially violating the law, because it is the law. They've been violating it for years now. Let me just ask you, when it comes to the Hyde Amendment, which is the law of the land, will you work to ensure that all of our rules and regulations, everything that comes across your desk, is in full compliance with the Hyde Amendment, and we are not spending federal taxpayer dollars to promote abortion in any way?
As I've said, Senator, we will abide by all laws on the books.
Very good. Let me ask you just a couple more things, and when it comes to the policies of life, because again, you're going to have a lot of influence over the regulatory environment. Would you agree that federal funding for family planning through Title X, through that grant program, should not include federal funding for abortion providers?
Again, the president has made his views on abortion really clear throughout the campaign. I'm not going to get ahead of the president with regard to the budget process. We have submitted budgets in years past that give the Senate a sense of how he would budget, but I'm not going to get ahead of the president on that.
But let me ask you this, and just to be clear, what I just asked about was the Trump policy from in his first term, but here's another one. Pregnancy resource centers, should they be able to receive federal funding through federal grants? That was the president's policy in his first term. Do you think, again, as a matter of federal rules, pregnancy resource centers ought to be eligible?
Again, the president's a pro-life president. He had a very pro-life record. He had an extensive debate within the campaign at his views, and I'm not going to get ahead of him on the budget process, but I think the country has a good sense of where he is on the issues.
Let me ask you just one more. The Mexico City policy, which I know you're familiar with, OIRA is very important in that policy. That's just the policy for those keeping track at home that says that American foreign aid dollars, tax money, shouldn't be spent on abortions overseas. President Trump championed this in his first term. Every Republican president has for decades now. Do you agree with the Mexico City policy, and would you implement it if the president directed you to?
Absolutely, we'll implement anything the president's asked me to direct.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vogt. It's great to see you again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.